We every year have the opportunity and privilege to celebrate Constitution and Citizenship Day, and there's government and justice studies professors that are really kind of heading that up. But this year I thought, communication can help out too, and I have this friend at ASU who does a lot of work in the First Amendment and religious liberty and thinking about what that means, the implications of it, and that relates to communication. So I feel like I can help out too. So I'm really appreciative that you're here to hear from Dr. Anderson. Like I said, Dr. Anderson is a friend of mine, a friend of Nolan's. He's a professor of philosophy and religious studies at ASU, and he has several books. I only picked 3 of the most pertinent. Hey, there you go. And he's the author of The Natural Moral Law, The Good After Modernity. It was published by Cambridge University Press in 2012. He's the author of Reason and Faith in the Theology of Charles Hodge, American Common Sense Realism, published in 2013. And most recently, I think, right, the Declaration of Independence and God, Self-Evident Truths in American Law. That was published in 2015 by Cambridge University Press. And he has a forthcoming work that's going to be coming out in January, the Cambridge Companion to, we don't have it up there, but it's on a flyer, the Cambridge Companion to the First Amendment and Religious Liberty. He's a co-editor with Michael Breitenbach. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Anderson.
Thank you for having me here. It's nice to be at your campus, and I welcome Sun Devil to GCU to talk about religious liberty. Kind of a good mixture, right? Now, just yesterday, the Arizona Supreme Court decided a case involving a wedding invitations business. The court decided this business was within their rights to not design invitations for a gay wedding, gay marriage. So the court said this about religion in their decision. The rights of free speech and free exercise, so precious to this nation since its founding, are not limited to soft murmurings behind the doors of a person's home or church, or private conversations with like-minded friends and family. These guarantees protect the right of every American to express their beliefs in public. This includes the right to create and sell words, paintings, and art that express a person's sincere religious beliefs. So that's getting to us to the definition of religion, which is what we want to talk about today. The First Amendment is first in the list, and since we're doing Constitution Day, right, especially the Bill of Rights, and the First Amendment is the first because it really protects our first freedoms, right? The freedom of speech and the freedom of exercise of religion, not having religion infringed by being institutionalized by the government. So freedom of religion and speech. Do you guys value those? Now the question is, what is religion? And we start to get a hint from the quote I just read. We're going to be talking about that today. What is religion and who is religious? Are you religious? Are you at a religious school? Sometimes I see the billboards on I-17 and it says, I think it's very good advertising, right? GCU, was it local, private, and Christian? Oh, no, affordable, private, and Christian. Right? Yeah. So Christianity, that's one of the religions, isn't it? If you take a world religion class, does that include Christianity?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit today about what is religion, especially in relationship to our freedoms, and get into some of the chapter from the book that was mentioned, the Cambridge Companion to the First Amendment and Religious Liberty, and look at my chapter for that. So what is religion? Do we need religious liberty? So the first case up there is the one that just got decided by the Arizona Supreme Court. The second one I mentioned is much older. You can see United States versus Seeger in 1965. And I'm going to mention this case. This was a conscientious objector to Vietnam, but he was essentially a secular humanist. He didn't identify with any of the standard denominations that do conscientious objection. So as an atheist, is he allowed to use that as a reason to get out of going to military service? So it went to the Supreme Court. I'm going to look at, let me read a quote from that. Oh, I have the quote on a different file, sorry. So the exact quote, I'll paraphrase it for you. Religion has to do with your deeply held beliefs by which you find meaning in the world, and they serve the same role in your life that belief in the deity serves in the religions like Christianity. So in other words, your religion may not have God, the creator, but you have some other beliefs, some other values that serve that same role, and that's what religion is. And it's especially connected up with finding meaning in life. So your beliefs about meaning. So the test of a religious belief is whether it is sincere. You could try to get out, let's say you invent a religion to get out of taxes. So that's what they mean by sincere. It's not something you invented just to get out of something else. You really do believe this. And it's a meaningful belief occupying in the life of its possessor a place parallel to that filled by the God of those admittedly qualified for the exemption. So yeah, that was a quote on PowerPoint. I didn't put the other quote up there because it's a bit longer, and usually you don't want long quotes on PowerPoints. You use them just for outlines. So religion has to do with the beliefs you have by which you use them to give meaning to your life. Now, I wanted to mention a couple things that case looked at. It gave a list of the divisions in religion, a list of examples of different kinds of religious beliefs, and just wanted to mention those briefly. That some people believe in a personal God or supreme deity. That's obvious, right? And in fact, sometimes I've heard Christians say that everyone believes in God. And so they might look at world religions as a study of what other people think about God, as if everyone believes in God the Creator, instead of saying, no, other religions don't have a similar metaphysical being. Some religions, some believe in a religion as a way of life that's aimed at understanding, mutual understanding and peace. That falls more consistent with the Seeger. That was his view. As a secular humanist, religion is something used to promote universal understanding and peace. Some believe that God is the depth of our being. Pantheists, like maybe Emerson. God is being itself, and so you are God. Is that kind of flattering? Oh, thank you. All is God. Or Buddhists who strive for peace through self-denial. The first noble truth, all is suffering, all is change. Nothing is permanent. And then second, that the suffering can be overcome. And you learn about self-denial. Or Hindus who believe in a transcendent reality, which is truth, knowledge, and bliss, this thing that is one, all is one. So none of these fit, all of these represent divergent religious beliefs. They disagree with each other. They don't agree about things. You can't say something like religion is when everyone believes in God, because not all religions do believe in God. So in that case, I was using that as an example for defining religion. What they said was religion is when those set of beliefs you have that we use to find meaning, that are similar to belief in God. Now that's why we need the First Amendment, right? Because we have divisions about things. If we agreed about these things, would we need, it might be, I guess, a formal nicety, but you wouldn't really need it, the protection for religious freedom. So the fact of disunity is why we need it. But what I want to ask today, and one of the things I want to leave you with is this question. Is that an unending problem? Is the First Amendment meant to protect us to simply have religious pluralism forever? I want to suggest that the purpose of the First Amendment is to give us a context in which we are able to discuss and debate to come to the truth of the matter, to come to have knowledge. And ultimately, the First Amendment's goal is that we do know what is real, what is good. Not simply to be a placeholder for unending divisions which keep us from being able to work together. I'm going to look at Thomas Jefferson as an example of that. So how do we understand religious liberty, and do we still need it? In both these cases I've mentioned, the definition of religion is connected to that search for meaning. So if we ask, do we still need religious liberty, it's like, do we still need the freedom to pursue meaning? Would you like the government to get involved in your pursuit of meaning? There are other cases I could have cited as well that are more specifically about that, where the justices said, yeah, we don't want the government to dictate how you pursue meaning. That's stepping out of their bounds. So today on Constitution Day, we're especially looking at that question, meaning. And I'm going to be arguing that we can in fact come to agreement on the matters that the First Amendment protects. So we shouldn't be surprised about that. once we've defined religion this way, I think it takes it out of the definition of religion as opinion. Have you heard of that before? Religion is like your personal opinion. It's more like your favorite pizza topping. So you like to baptize teenagers, other people baptize babies. Some people think nature is God. It's all a matter of opinion. Some people like mushrooms on their pizza, did you know that? Anchovies. And you wouldn't ever say we're going to come to a point in human history where we agree on the best pizza topping. We recognize the freedom of matters of taste. So once we put religion into something like that, then we would say, yeah, there just always will be differences. But religion is not really like that, is it? Religion is making claims about what is real. I read a list here, just a couple examples that the Supreme Court gave. Those are not claims about what people feel about the world. Those are claims about what really exists. And they can't all be true. Some of them are false. Would you like to learn the method for figuring that out, for coming to have knowledge? Now I'm going to look at a couple pieces from my article, my chapter for the book coming up. I make this case. Have you ever heard of natural religion? I argue that the United States was founded on natural religion. There's debates, is the United States a Christian nation or not? And I'm kind of sidestepping that by saying, well, without commenting on that, natural religion plays a key role at the beginning of the United States. Natural religion is not the same as nature religion. You might think, the United States was founded on worshiping nature. No. Natural religion is sometimes also called natural theology. We use the word natural religion because when you say theology, you already imported God and settled the question. So natural religion studies what can humans know by reason alone, apart from scriptures, about questions like this. How do I know? And what is real? And what is good? So the United States was founded on natural religion. The grievances justifying independence rest on the claim that there are some things self-evident about God and human nature, and from these come human rights and the structure of human government. Specifically, the Declaration of Independence claims it is self-evident that there is a creator and that humans are created. Human equality and rights rest on this claim about creation. So the eventual Constitution and Bill of Rights are further examples of the development of general revelation into the political and social realms, as opposed to appeals to divine origination or special revelation. Right, if you look back and you study the origin of nations, many of them, I don't want to say all, but many of them claim to have been founded by a deity. Rome certainly does, doesn't it? But the United States doesn't do that, does it? If you read through the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence, there's not like a footnote, and you go down and it says Genesis 1:2, right, or John 3:16. Right? Instead, what the Declaration of Independence does is it relies on natural theology to say, look, there are some things that are self-evident about God, that God created us. We are created by God. And that's in contrast to a number of these, right? Not all is one. God the Creator and the creation are distinct. And it's on that basis that we have rights. Because we're made by God, we have that same human nature. We have rights. So think about this statement. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. Often we jump to the equal part. But how do they get to the equal part? Through the created part, right? And to be created, there must be a creator. So all of us are created equal and endowed with certain unalienable rights by the Creator. So there's a lot of religious claims, quote-unquote religious claims, in the sense of claims about what is real, by which we use to find meaning. And we can especially discern three parts in that famous sentence. There's an epistemology part. Epistemology is the study of knowledge. How do we know? So it answers that question right away. What does it say? Well, we know because these things are self-evident. Now, in the book I have about the Declaration, I raised some questions about that. That's a tricky concept, self-evident. Tricky in the sense of these don't seem to be self-evident now, right? People disagree that we're created. Here's a list of other options. But at least this much, that is an epistemology. They're trying to answer the question, how do we know? And then they answer the question of metaphysics. Metaphysics asks this, what is real? And the Declaration gives an answer to that right away. Isn't it nice how succinct it is? Look at this. Would you like to read that? What if the Declaration was that thick? No, just in one sentence. There's some wisdom in being able to summarize things, distill them down into one sentence, and it gives a metaphysics answer, right? What is real? Well, God the Creator, and also human nature. That's an important one, and people might challenge today. They might say human nature is changing or something, right? It's not a constant concept. And then it gives an ethical claim. Ethics studies this question: what is good, or what is of value, right? And so it makes a claim about that we have certain rights. So in all three of those areas of philosophy, epistemology, metaphysics, and ethics are answered right there, and on that basis it then goes on. Most of the document is about grievances. People especially like the first section, but most of it's about these grievances which rest on these claims. So the First Amendment has practical applications simply because people disagree about religion. And indeed, disagreement about religious opinions is sometimes taken as a trademark of religion. Right? When you say religion, that's one of two topics where you just know you're going to disagree. What's the other one?
Politics.
Politics, right? So religious studies and poli-sci, those are the brave professors that go into those fields. You don't bring those up. But religious knowledge is like knowledge in any field. It has its goal not merely of true belief, which is an opinion. You could have opinions which are true, but you don't know that they're true, right? They might be true on accident. So religious knowledge's goal is not simply true opinion, but knowledge, where you can have a justified true belief. You're able to both have a belief, it is true, and you can show that it's true. And when we have this, we can come to agreement about that topic. So there's nothing unique about religion where we say, no one can agree about that. We can agree in math and biology, but we can't agree in religion. There's nothing unique about it. It's still asking this question: what is real? Is God the Creator real? And how do we know? Can we show it? Is human nature real? And think about some of the debates from this Arizona court case I mentioned, which is about human nature as well. How do we understand human nature and its origin, having come from a man and a woman? And what relevance does that have for us still? That we still come from a man and a woman? So the First Amendment religion clauses are universal, and they apply to everybody. This is not just because you might potentially become religious, but, and this will be controversial, when we have some question time in a minute, I hope you'll ask me questions. They apply to everyone because everyone already is religious. So these points I have here, the first one we discussed, religion has to do with meaning, and how we interpret our lives. And then all are religious. What do you think? And here, with quotes like that, you say, yeah, that seems right. Or at least everyone in the room. But what about people who say, no, I'm not religious. I'm an atheist. Or how about this one? Have you done this one? I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. And I've seen Christians say it, right? Oh, I'm a Christian, I'm not religious. Religion's about a personal relationship. Religion is about going somewhere and doing what they tell you to do. So it all depends on what you mean by the terms involved, right? So the word religion is ambiguous in different settings. It gets used in different ways. And in the legal setting and in the scholastic setting we're talking about, the academic setting, we're defining it in terms of the beliefs that we use to give meaning. And then it doesn't have to do with specifically things like belief in God, or the use of a certain set of scriptures, or going to a building on a certain day of the week. Thomas Paine and Emerson both said, nature is my church. And there were slightly different, one's a deist, one's a pantheist. But they would say someone might go out in nature and say, that's where I see the grandeur of God. I don't want to go to a church made by humans. But either way, you have beliefs about what the world is like, what is real. Is there anybody, atheist, Christian, Hindu, who doesn't want meaning? Does the atheist have beliefs that he uses to give meaning to his life? That was that Seeger case. That was the whole point. Was he was saying, hey, I have the same beliefs. For that guy, let's say as an atheist, he wanted to be considered religious so he could get an exemption from military service, right? So it's interesting because nowadays you might have an atheist who says, no, I'm not religious. But then if he's in that same setting, he'll say, yes, I am religious. In that analogical sense to the Christian. So all persons are religious. And that's important for this reason, because sometimes religion is thought of as the biased thing. I was looking at some of the articles in today's paper, about the Arizona court decision. And a few of them, I think I might have had them mentioned later, said things like that. The Arizona State Supreme Court allows religious bigots to discriminate. That was one of the titles. So religion sometimes thought that way. Religion's not neutral, but secularism is neutral. And I'm suggesting, no, neither one of those is neutral. They're both making claims about what is real. And they both say the other guys are wrong about their claims. So they both need to give evidence or proof for their claims. You don't get away with saying, well, I'm secular, so I'm neutral. Well, that's a claim about what is real. And that's the next point. Religion is cognitive. Sometimes religion is put into the area of the non-cognitive, which means the feelings. Sort of like matters of taste, like I mentioned before. Or simply religious experiences. There are two things that happen in religious experience. There's the experience. Like the other day, this angel of light appeared to me. And he was so charming and beautiful. I knew that what he was saying must be true, because an angel of light would not like you, would he? You should know the reference here. Who is the light bearer? You know his name? You can look it up. But in that case, what? The sun devil? See, they knew I'd get a sun devil joke. Oh, Lucifer, right? He comes as an angel of light, so you can't decide if what this angel is telling you is true based on how they look, right? Well, this guy is really handsome, so he must be telling the truth. Of course he would appear that way. So there's the experience, then there's the content of the experience. Those are separate. And people can have the exact same experience, but give it different interpretations, different content. And that's where you can challenge it. I mean, when you think about court, that's what a judge does, right? The people involved all had a similar experience, and they're understanding it in very different ways and arguing about what it means. That's what a judge and jury have to figure out. So the experience itself doesn't prove anything. If it did, we wouldn't need courts. It's the interpretation. That's where we get into religion. And religion is cognitive. You're making claims about what is real, what exists, what is good and valuable. And so the next point I'm going to get to with Thomas Jefferson is that religious beliefs cannot be compelled. Really, this is true of any belief. But especially, Thomas Jefferson argues religious beliefs in his defense of the Virginia Statute of Religious Freedom, 1777, and really then the defense of the First Amendment. What would it mean to compel religious beliefs? And then the last point, is that before I switch slides, that the First Amendment does not require skepticism and unending pluralism. People misunderstand it to think that's what it means. Well, we need the First Amendment because no one will ever agree in religion. Well, all you know for sure is that they don't currently agree. But why would you think they never would agree? Have you given up on the Great Commission? Or do you plan to disciple the nations? Teaching them to observe all that has been commanded. Not most of it, except for the harder ones. So do you expect that people will come to agree? The First Amendment gives us a context in which to pursue knowledge, the freedom of knowledge. Just like in the academy, they have tenure, which provides you with the freedom to pursue knowledge. But the idea is that there is knowledge to be had, and you should pursue it and get it. And that's the same thing for religion. So, Thomas Jefferson, Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom. Why not just, if there is knowledge, and if the higher-ups know it, why not just have them write a law that makes everyone do it? Wouldn't that be nice? Does religious belief work that way? Now he says this, well aware that the opinions and belief of men depend not on their own will, but follow involuntarily the evidence proposed to their minds, that, whereas the Almighty God hath created the mind free and manifested his supreme will, that free it shall remain by making it altogether insusceptible of restraint. That all attempts to influence it by temporal punishments or burdens or by civil incapacitations tend only to beget habits of hypocrisy and meanness, and are a departure from the plan of the holy author of our religion, who being Lord both of body and mind, yet chose not to propagate it by coercions on either, as was in his almighty power to do, but to extend it by its influence on reason alone. So think about each of those points. The opportunity is provided by the First Amendment to use reason and discuss together. What does he mean? Have you thought about it before, that your beliefs aren't under your power? That your beliefs follow involuntarily from the evidence you've considered. So if you see the evidence, if it rains, the grass will be wet, and it's raining outside, your mind forms the belief the grass will be wet. You don't have power over that. That's how minds work with evidence. All men are mortal, and Socrates is a man. Your mind forms a third belief. Has it done it yet? It's like giving birth. Your mind will give birth to a little baby. Two beliefs come together, and a little baby belief comes out. Well, Socrates must be mortal. Right? And you can't stop it from doing that. And so to chastise someone for their beliefs without looking at the evidence that they're using for their beliefs is mistaken. Now, that doesn't mean that all beliefs have good evidence, right? But the person thinks that there's something that supports their belief. And that, therefore, we need to be able to use reason, Thomas Jefferson said. Hey, it's from the founding fathers, so we're stuck using reason. Even in matters of faith. Does that surprise you? Matters of religious belief. So you can notice that in that quote I had there are metaphysical assertions. Theological assertions. As I said, metaphysics is the study of what is real. Metaphysical assertions. We're living in a metaphysical world. So, the belief that in God the Creator, and that God made us with minds that operate a certain way, especially through the use of reason to come to agreement. And the critical aspect of human nature he considered there is that it is free. So religious freedom, or religious liberty. Are you free? That's an important part of your developmental age group, right? Asserting your liberty or your freedom so you can define your own personhood. And you would hate that if you lost your liberty. But are you really free? Or do you just do what your peers do? Do you rebel in a conformist fashion? Are there conformist ways to rebel? All rebelling in the exact same way? What is it to be free? Well, what Jefferson especially contrasts it with is coercion. You're free if you can do what you want. And if the government comes in and says, you're not allowed to go to a Baptist church, well, they're coercing your religious beliefs, right? Or you're not free to go to the Catholic church. They're coercing your religious beliefs. So freedom doesn't have to do with being uncaused. If you get into philosophy and you study freedom of will, you might hear about that. Freedom has to do with being uncaused. No, freedom, in this case, has to do with not being coerced to do what you don't want to do. You're free to do what you want. And that's true in the area of religion. And it's interesting that he specifically appeals to God as having made humans that way. And think about that evidence. Your beliefs follow involuntarily from the evidence. What if you're not paying attention to the evidence? Is that possible? Have you read Romans chapter 1, 18 through 21, what it says about the evidence? And are you thinking right now, wait, are sun devils allowed to quote from the Bible? That's a good question. I'll have to look at the manual. Depends for what purpose. Isn't it also written? Is it clear from the things that are made as the eternal power and divine nature of God clearly revealed for the things that are made, so that unbelief is without excuse? So then, think about what that means. The reality of not knowing God isn't due to a lack of evidence. It's due to not having been seeking to know. And we often try to put the blame there on the evidence, right? I'm trying really hard to know God, and I can't tell if God is real. And what Romans is saying is, no, it's just the opposite. It's clear. The eternal power and divine nature of God are clear from the things that are made. And so then later in chapter 3, sin is defined that way. 3, 10, and 11, it says, no one seeks, no one understands, and no one does what is right. That's quite an indictment, isn't it? No one. Right? For all have sinned. But they should know God. If they were to use reason, they would know God. So I'd already mentioned this slide. I go over that in the Declaration of Independence, which I mentioned before, how it follows that kind of a pattern. It simply makes this assertion, which I think got us into trouble later. It's self-evident that all humans are created. So Thomas Paine and Thomas Jefferson could both agree on that. But later, you'll have more atheists, but also pantheists. I don't know if you paid attention to that difference. Because a pantheist like Emerson might speak very highly, he might use the word God and speak very highly of God, but he's actually a pantheist, very influenced by the Bhagavad Gita and Hindu teaching, and became what is called a transcendentalist. So you should look into those things. How is that different than theist? But so that's different. So where an atheist might say there is no God, the pantheist would say, oh yes, of course there's God. Everything's God. Right? But then there's no God the Creator. Because God the Creator means there's also not God, the creation. Right? This says all is one. Both is the same thing. Now next I look at Socrates, transitioning from Thomas Jefferson to Socrates. And this is quite a jump. But this is a favorite text. Who of you have already had the Apology? One of your introductory courses, right? Isn't that one of the standard readings? And so some of that I should be able to take for granted that you know about the trial of Socrates. And it's usually thought of as just kind of a weird philosopher causing troubles. Why would he do that? Just be quiet and live your life. But instead he goes around asking people if they're wise or not. Isn't that just asking for it? I have students who will read the Apology and they'll be kind of like, hey, I feel kind of bad, but I don't like Socrates. Why is he bothering everyone and pointing out that they're not wise? And you might go to relate, like, what if you're somewhere and some guy comes up to you and points out that you're not wise? Like, hey, I don't like you. But what I look at this here is in terms of a religious trial. Not simply in the philosophical sense of who is wise and who isn't, but this is really a kind of religious trial and gives us a good model of how those work and why they're no good. Think about what happened to Socrates, right? He goes to an oracle. This is divine revelation, right? We're not saying it's true, that really happened. But he goes to the god to get input. And the god, or his student does, right? And the student says, who is the wisest? What would you have asked? Who's the most beautiful? Totally different answer. Have you seen the bust of Socrates? Those would have been different answers. I should be careful, because I have a picture next to it in the British Museum where I say, hey, you can kind of see the similarities, so I should be careful, huh? So who is the wisest? And the oracle says Socrates. So this is kind of like divine revelation to Socrates. And when you get that, you can't just ignore it, but he also feels sort of conflicted because he doesn't think that's true, that he's the wisest. So he decides what he'll do is a kind of scientific experiment. He'll go out and he'll test the hypothesis by asking other categories of persons if they're wise or not. So he starts with the politicians, they must know. And he looks at the artists, and he looks at the artisans, tradesmen. What he finds out about all of them is similar, which is that they thought they were wise, they thought they knew, but they didn't really know. And that's a common condition for humans, called pride. They'll think they have knowledge, but knowledge requires being able to prove it. So Socrates would ask them what is good, and they might have a lot to say, but then when he follows up with how do you know, they don't have sufficient proof. And the outcome was the same for all of them, that they hated him for having exposed them. So they brought these charges against him. Do you remember the charges they brought? They could bring these against me, given that I'm a Sun Devil. He's an atheist who corrupts the youth. Doesn't that sound like a dangerous fellow? Or the atheism one was nuanced. Or atheist, or he's teaching other gods than Athens recognizes. And so here in Athens, you would expect that they would have a kind of pagan pluralism. There's actually some people who advocate for pagan pluralism because they seem so nice. You can worship whoever you want. And here we find out, no, you can't. There are restrictions and limits. You must worship within a prescribed pantheon. And so they try him. And in the court case, he shows that he's not an atheist. He's following the voice of the oracle. And he shows that he is the one who corrupts youth. He actually inverts the argument to show how they could corrupt youth. The one who corrupts youth is the one who doesn't know but thinks they know and passes on that kind of ignorance. This introduces two characters, the fool and the simple. Have you heard of those? The fool is the one who thinks he knows but he doesn't know. And he often speaks very proudly and loudly, wants to teach others. And that's what Socrates exposed. The simpleton is a little different. The simpleton, you've heard of Homer the simpleton? He doesn't care to know. Right? He goes about his business, goes about his life, doesn't want wisdom, and doesn't pretend to want wisdom. But those are both equally problematic. You should want wisdom, but you shouldn't think you have it when you don't. And by way of contrast to the fool and the simple is the examined life, or the famous Socratic dictum, the unexamined life is not worth living. So part of what we do in religion, what we're supposed to be doing is leading that examined life. We could put it this way, becoming more conscious and more consistent. I wonder if you could say that. I went to GCU to raise my consciousness, to elevate my consciousness to a new plane. That might sound like spirituality, right? But there's a sense in which we do become more conscious in this way. We become aware of our beliefs. What do we actually believe? Many of us don't know ourselves very well. And you can know what you believe by looking at how you live. Those often don't line up. Someone will say, I believe in these things, and they're not living consistently with that at all. They're living as if something else is the truth, right? So you can look at your life, and you might say, I believe in X, Y, and Z. You don't live that way at all. So what do you actually believe? Well, you can look at how you live. What are the implications of how you live your life? That's becoming more conscious, especially in these three questions. How do I know what is real and what is good? That would be a good journal entry, wouldn't it? Starting maybe backwards, starting with what is good. What do you think is the highest goal in life? The First Amendment protects your ability to think about that and to live that way. And then behind that would be, well, what is real? For example, if you thought the highest goal in life was being a unicorn hunter, well, this is premised on the idea that unicorns are real. If unicorns aren't real, they're a fiction, then that'll be a fiction, right? Imagine how it would work out for Sam and Dean Winchester in the real world. Right? They wouldn't have any of these things to hunt down because they're not real. So if you watch the show, it's kind of like a how-to guide to life. It's how to be a Winchester, I think. Well, it won't work out well for you. So to know what is good, you got to know what is real. And behind that, Socrates will ask you this question, well, how do you know that? Imagine maybe someone does say, I think unicorns are real. Well, how do you know that? I was watching a law show the other day about Australia. So it had the British crest behind the judge, and it had the lion and the unicorn. Right? I don't know that they say they're real. So raising your consciousness and consistency so that you can even have debates. When we debate things like weddings and businesses, are we even aware of where we disagree? Maybe at one level we are. I disagree about this kind of ceremony, this kind of union. But are you aware of the other theological assumptions behind those things? Why is it important that humans were created man and woman, that all of us came from a man and woman? However you end up organizing your relationships going forward, you came from a man and woman, right? Why does that matter? Why is that theologically important? Metaphysically important, philosophically important? And are we able to have those debates in our culture without just turning it into name calling? And are we able to come to agreement? And sometimes agreement means having to recognize, oh, I was mistaken, and now I have to change my mind to believe something else. Because I didn't know. I thought I knew, and I didn't know. So the First Amendment provides us with that ability, doesn't it? Isn't that wonderful? Imagine if you had that freedom and you didn't take that opportunity. Wouldn't that have been a lost opportunity? So can Christians provide knowledge for their claims? I can serve as a kind of Socrates to you. Do you know, or do you only think you know? And that's really asking two different kinds of questions. Raising your consciousness about Christianity. What has historic Christianity actually taught? Do you know? And then are you able to defend those beliefs to show that they are indeed true? And shouldn't we expect Christians to be able to do that? Is that asking too much? Adult, mature Christians. Is that asking too much? And can we use that knowledge to solve problems and settle disputes? So there are problems in our society, and there are problems that are, we'll call them existential. They're sincere problems. People say, I want to live this way. It's consistent with my sincerely held beliefs. And we shouldn't doubt that. But as Jefferson pointed out, our beliefs come to us involuntarily through evidence we've considered, and we might have misunderstood things, right? And we should have known otherwise. I'm not suggesting it's not culpable. You should have known otherwise. And are Christians able to address that or not? They might not have done that in their own life. Are we able to show that God is real and knowing God is our highest good? The First Amendment provides us with that opportunity to do that in our own lives, but also to have that cultural or social debate and discussion. I don't know about you. Now let's transition to the question part. My suspicion is we're not doing very well with those discussions. We maybe go to one question and then it degrades very quickly from all my research on Facebook. So leaving this with, do we need religious liberty? Well, as belief-forming humans, this is our first freedom. That's why speech, publishing, and religion are all in that first one, right? You have the freedom, you form beliefs. No one can stop you from doing that. And we use those beliefs to answer these questions I mentioned. How do I know what is real, what is good? So knowledge of God and the good is possible. And the First Amendment gives us the context to show this. It's not simply unending pluralism. Now what questions do you have, Lord?